Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I played in my most recent tournament, which was one of the most brilliant and tactical games that I've ever played over the board. This was insane, and we're just going to get into it. I start off the game with d4. Yes, I'm playing a 1500, 230 points lower rated than me, by the way. Before we start, the ratings you see are USCF. They are around 400 to 500 points lower than online ratings, and the time control for this format is an hour and 30 for each player. Either way, my opponent goes knight f6, and I decide in this position to play something that I haven't played in a long time. What I've been normally playing here in over the board tournaments has been bishop to f4 and simply getting into a London structure with e3. Maybe I play c4 at some point, knight c3, and knight f2 if I can draw arrows at all. But for this game, I'm playing something that I haven't played in a while just because I wanted a bit more of a fun game, and I play the move bishop to g5 after some thought. My opponent, clearly knowing what he's doing, and I thought that he would understand a decent bit of this, he plays c5 pretty quickly. I play d5, and my opponent shocks me on move 3 of this game with a big inaccuracy already. My opponent, knowing what he's doing, he told me after the game that he had played this before and he had gotten good results with this. My opponent here played the move e6, which already set me off onto a spiral and set me off into a bit of a confusion because I'd never seen this move. I mean, maybe I have, but I haven't studied this move. I don't know any of the theory here, and I had to take a little bit of time. What people normally play after d5 is they normally go for some queen b6, and after knight c3, we get into some very interesting lines with bishop d2 and queen b6 back. And yeah, black is up a pawn, but white is able to get the whole center of e4, and many different lines with that exist. And it looks like a Benoni type structure. But after e6, now what ends up happening is that I don't have to commit to this to knight c3 and bishop d6, and to knight c3, letting him take this pawn, and then bishop back to d2. Instead, I thought for some time, and I just played knight c3 straight away, and like a minute or two, not too much time. And I'm basically just arguing that, well, now if you play queen b6, which he does in the game, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to really be too cautious, and I'm just able to defend my pawn in all future variations. Another point of knight c3 is that I'm preparing the move e4. I'm defending this pawn, of course, and I want to play rook b1. I want to play rook b1 and defend this pawn. I want to play rook b1, e4, knight c3, if I can draw arrows, bishop out to probably the e2 square at some point, and probably short castles. This is the main plan right now, and if we're just looking at it like this, white is just better. White is just better because they have a space advantage, and there's not much that black can really do here. And also they have more development. Queen b6 is an inaccuracy. Going after this pawn doesn't work here, simply because the queen, it really should be defending the knight. And one of my threats that he missed out on was that there are some lines here where I trade off the bishop for the knight, and I ruin his pawn structure, and then I'm able to clamp down onto all of the center. So that's what I do. I think for a little bit, and I find a pretty reasonable plan. I take on f6 first, which is nice. This is the best move in the position. I'm glad I saw this. The other line is e4, but I thought this made a lot more sense because I didn't want to get into more of these poison pawn variations. So I said took on f6. My opponent has to recapture with the f pawn. If they take here, you might say, okay, well, two pieces are hanging, but remember, the bishop is defending the knight currently, and even though it won't be able to in the future, I'm able to play rook b1 now, defended by the knight, defended by the queen. The knight is still defended. Queen a3 keeps an eye on this, and even something like rook to b3 will be able to save the day after whoa, maybe I'm wrong, sorry. No, computer's already saying crazy things. Rook to b5 is what it's saying, and then I'm play for something else. So maybe not rook to b3, now I can play knight b5, right? And after check, we have bishop back to c3, defended by the knight. Okay, there we go. That's a much more reasonable line. I'd probably be able to find that over the board, but either way, my opponent just recaptures, and I play rook b1, and I'm better. I'm just better. There's nothing that he can do. In fact, I'm so much better that it's very, very difficult for black to make a move, which is why my opponent spent a long time here. My opponent's queen is off sides right now. It's targeting this pawn that's easily defendable, and it's actually in the way of some of my opponent's my attacks by sometimes I'm able to play a3 and b4 and open up some lines against the queen. Another thing here is that my opponent's doubled pawns, while they don't look like a weakness right now because they're in with this nice little pawn chain here, they are actually a huge problem for black, because if you ever push at this pawn, these pawns immediately get weak. For example, this move is not a good move because look at these terrible pawns, and I'm able to play e4 immediately, not allow this one to go forward, and I would be winning, just simply positionally winning in 6 moves, which would be bad. And if my opponent really does anything else, my opponent like can't take here. Now they're isolated, right? That's even worse. And this is just really, really difficult for my opponent. My opponent makes a mistake right away. The only move here for black is the idea that he needs to play bishop to g7 and f5 immediately. This is the only idea for black. Otherwise, black is just completely lost. And after my opponent's move d6, which genuinely I could not really understand. I guess it makes sense from a standpoint that my opponent doesn't really have that many moves, but the point of d6 is to open up some squares for the knight, since this pawn is very, very restrictive of the knight, right? So he's trying to open up some squares for the knight, but I didn't see a good square for my opponent to go to, because if my opponent's ever going to play f5, this pawn is not good. Like, it's just not a good pawn on f5, and f5, of course, to move the knight over to this square. And also, the knight just doesn't seem like it really wants to be there. Like, I can play e4 first, for example, which is my next move. So I play e4, now disallowing f5, and now you cannot have this idea. And the other way, if he goes over here, what is the knight doing, right? Like, the knight is targeting these 2 squares, but it doesn't make any sense. And also, you'd have to take like 4 moves to do that by bringing the queen back and bringing the knight in, which is just way too much. And this position is already positionally lost already in 7 moves, which is crazy. So then why, if I'm so winning in this position, does this like end up being one of like the greatest games I've ever played? Well, because it's not over. My opponent here plays the only way for him to have any chance. There is no play in the center. There is no play ever. He has 3 pieces doing nothing, 1 piece offsides, 1 piece also doing nothing, so he has to bring his pieces into the game. The only way to do that is with the move h5, which is a very, very good move. The point is that he wants to play bishop to h6, and also he might want to push in some lines. And he also wants to get the rook active, right? This is like my opponent's only way to get counterplay, which is good that he spotted this. But after a little bit of consideration, I thought, okay, h5, isn't that just like a huge weakness? Aren't you just giving me like a pawn to target now? And I thought about it. The best move here is knight f3, by the way, but I didn't really believe in this. Like, I didn't see what the knight was doing. I guess the point is that I'm bringing the knight over to the c4 square, but I didn't see this idea right away. Instead of that, I decided to go for something a little more concrete. And I saw this line that after the move h4, my opponent has no way to defend the pawn. Like, h4, there's nothing he can do to defend the pawn besides takes bishop here, which obviously is bad because you're just ruining your pawn structure permanently, and the threat is simply bishop to e2, right? And there's nothing he can do. There's nothing he can do. The rook defends, but like, I mean, how is the queen getting over there for like this? No, come on. And yeah, I'm just thought, okay, I'm winning the pawn after h4, so I played the move h4. But this is not correct. It's still good, but knight f3 was significantly better. Of course, I mean, I'm winning a pawn. I'm completely winning. It's pretty hard to make a huge mistake here. I guess a huge mistake would be like rook a1, but come on, we're not going to do that. h4. My opponent goes e5, which makes sense. The idea is bishop to g4 and f5 to try and like hamper my little divot here in his position, but he's just not fast enough as I play bishop to e2, and my positional advantage is about to become a material one with me just being able to pick up this pawn. And at the end of the day, these two pawns here are going to be very strong. These two pawns here are going to be very strong, just pushing down the board. And there are some lines where I can just push my H pawn and make a queen. Like the position is that good that I'm able to do stuff like that, and it's basically almost game over for black if my opponent doesn't play it correctly. But of course, he does. He fights back with the move f5, which I think is the best move. The computer doesn't think it's the best move. They think knight d7 is the best move, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think f5 is the only move for black really to try and put pressure on the center and have any source of counterplay here, because now you have like some chances to get the pieces out. After f5, I think for a long time. I think for a long time. And the reason why I think so long is there are some really interesting nuances to the position. My opponent has a few lines. For example, I calculate this line. Bishop takes h5, takes. My opponent goes queen to b5. I have to drop the knight back to c3. My opponent goes bishop to f5 and has some interesting pressure. For example, he's threatening bishop takes c2, making my queen move, and then he would take the bishop in one move, right? I realized in that line, for example, I'm still better even though I haven't won a pawn there because of the move g4 after queen to e2. For example, I would play queen to e2 and then I would play the move g4, and there's nothing he can do. It's actually just game over. Sorry, wait. No, in that line, sorry, I'm messing up my lines. In that line, instead of queen to e2 would lose the pawn by rook takes. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused for some reason. No, queen to e2 doesn't lose the pawn because after rook takes pawn, I have h3. My opponent would have to go with queen to this square, and then g3 would fork these two pieces. And if the rook ever takes here, take the queen, takes my knight, and then I lose. No, this is also incorrect. Sorry, give me a second. The line is takes, check, knight c3, bishop to f5. Oh, and then I just get another move, and this is just easy. Yeah. No, bishop to f5. Sorry, this is all really stupid. Bishop to f5. My opponent has the threat of bishop to c2 in this line, but if I just simply don't allow that by playing the move bishop to e2, you might think that he's winning a pawn here, but actually he's not. After a3, my opponent can't take the rook, even though it's the best move. And after the move queen to f4, I have this move. After this move queen here, I have queen to c. No. I have takes, knight f3, and the rook is trapped. Yes, the rook is trapped. This is the line. This is the line. The rook is trapped. If my opponent's rook goes there, then I go with this check. Takes. Ugh. Sorry, this is a little bit intense, so let's take the arrows off the screen. Either way, that is to say that there's a lot to think about here. Also, do I take first? And go for something else, or do I take this pawn? I ended up taking on h5. That's all we're going to say. I ended up taking on h5, and we got into a line that I had calculated. Bishop takes h5. That was a little bit intense of some lines there, but whatever. All's fair in love. I guess that we should do stuff like that. But other way, bishop takes h5. My opponent takes on e4. Knight takes e4 is a mistake. I actually have to play a3 here, which I missed, simply stopping the move queen to b4 entirely. And then this pawn is a huge weakness. My opponent can't play f5, right, because of the bishop. And after bishop to f5, I would simply play at knight g to e2, threatening this move. Oh no, it's brilliant, but it's not really. If he takes my rook, then I would simply play knight g3, forking both the pieces, bishop to g5, bishop to g4, queen g4, and rook to h8. It sees me with a dominant position after move queen to e4, right? So he can't do that. I didn't really see that line, but I simply took on e4, my opponent plays queen to b4 check, and I go back to c3, and after the move bishop to f5, which I had seen, we get into the following line. The move here that wins for me is simply the move a3, but I missed this move. Again, for some reason, I didn't see this line with a3, and I instead played the line that I thought I was going to play, which is the move bishop to e2. And what's strange here is that after rook takes h4, I did calculate something, but I completely forget what I calculated. I remember a3, and I thought my opponent had to go to the f4 square, but what is wrong with this move? That's what I'm a little concerned about. What is wrong with... Oh, right! After queen takes, I have a fork. Oh, there we go. Now it's so obvious after I put it on the board. But yeah, queen to d4, there would be takes, and a fork. And of course, if you take with the pawn, then you would lose the rook. So my opponent decides not to take, even though that is the best line. He actually has to sacrifice his queen, which is a little bit insane. But we're not going to get into every single line here. Instead, my opponent goes knight to d7, which makes a lot of sense. And now the move a3 solidifies my advantage with the white pieces, simply because I'm up a pawn. And I have simple ideas of g4 and h4 in the future, which are some of the most fun things that I can do in this position, which is just push my pawns and pray, which is a little bit fun. And a3 also has a little bit of a hidden idea. a3, after my opponent goes queen to a5, the point is that now the queen is unobstructed from this line, which I enjoy, and now I'm able to start my plan with the move g4. And the pawns are going. There's not much my opponent can do. My opponent's bishop is basically trapped, by the way. My opponent has literally one square to go to. If you go to this square, yes, you can stay on there due to the pin, but it doesn't really seem that nice since I have moves like knight a3, and then I can just use the fact that my opponent's bishop is on that square to start developing my pieces very actively. So he doesn't want to do that either, but he decides to. He goes bishop to g6, and I think of a little bit of a stupid plan. I should have gone h5. I really should have gone h5, and after something like bishop to e7, I could probably play rook h3, bishop to h7, and literally whatever. I'm completely winning. I can go knight f3 and simply play for g4, right? This is for g5, sorry. And it's game over. It's game over here. Instead of that, I decide not to calculate too much, and I simply play knight f3 immediately. Point is that I want to reroute the knight over to this side of the board and start some sort of attack over here. And I thought that that was kind of where the play was in this position, because even though I'm up a pawn, it really doesn't feel like it, because my opponent is actually able to get some serious play here. My king is stuck in the center, and you can start seeing ghosts here if you're not if you're a little bit scared here. You can start seeing ghosts, and I was seeing ghosts. This is not an easy position to play with white, even though I'm technically completely winning, and I knew that. My opponent castles long, which made sense. The point is that he needs to get his king out of the way, right? He's not going to castle short ever. And he thinks that the king being over there makes some sense because he's also getting this rook into the game. After something like bishop to e7, you might have a plan of, sorry, not bishop to e7, about bishop to g7, you might have a plan of rook to e8, and maybe you start pushing this pawn, and then you can start being very scared with white, right? Because your opponent's coming down at you, they have a rook on the same file as your king. Castling this way is very scary since you've already pushed these pawns too forward, and it gets very terrifying, so you have to play now. For example, if I did something stupid like castling here, e4, and black is already completely winning. Black is already completely winning. Knight d2, rook takes h4, knight c4. I can do all of these moves, and I'm not even down a pawn, but at the end of the day, this is game over. This is simply game over. My opponent's next moves here are simply bishop to e7, rook d to h8, and checkmate. This can get out of hand really fast. So I have to be careful here, and I can't just do willy-nilly stuff like that. So the king must stay in the center. And after a long thought, I go with my plan. There's one line here that I was really considering, which was this move b4. The point is that after queen takes a3, rook b3, and the queen is trapped, which is nice. So we can't do that. And after c takes b4, a takes b4, still no queen here. The rook gets trapped, right? So my opponent has to go to c7, and then I'm able to like bring my knights in. I thought with the move knight to b5, but this is actually incorrect due to queen to b6. And I thought like this position might be okay after some like rook a1 and like some play here, but there's nothing. My opponent always has a6, and I don't have the play. I just don't have the play, so I have to be a little more better than that. And I thought of a different line. Actually, rook b3 here, and white is almost winning. This is the best line. But I didn't see all that, so I decided to instead go with something that I knew was good, I knew was simple, and I knew was just correct in going for the attack. And I played the move that I've been trying to play. I played knight to d2. And the point is, knight coming to c4, knight coming up, the knights are harassing over here, the king is kind of locked out, and then I'm going to be able to play moves like b4 and rip open the black king, which I like to do. By the way, another line after b4 is instead of this, I can take back with the rook. But this also isn't actually that good, since, yes, my opponent can't really take here due to rook b3. But what he can do is, I thought that he could just play knight to c5, and I didn't actually like this position very much. That this removal of the c5 pawn actually was bad for me, which is a little bit insane. But either way, knight to d2. And my opponent makes a grave error. My opponent has to realize that b4 isn't that strong right now due to the fact that my opponent has knight to c5 after the trade, right? But my opponent's next move gives me like everything I want and makes it so that b4 is always just completely winning. My opponent thinks for a long time. I don't blame him. It's a tough position. I would think for a long time too. In all honesty, I was mostly thinking about like bishop to h6, which is completely lost, but whatever. It's hard to make a move with black. And he plays knight to f6. And this is just not good. This is not good. Moving the knight away from here, while yes, it might look good that you're opening up squares for your king, this is just simply incorrect, and I'm able to get very easy play. For example, b4 now just works completely. After it takes, I can take with the rook, and see the eval bar is much stronger here because no knight c5. My opponent might have to actually go back to d7 to defend all of this, and of course then you have like weaknesses, and my opponent has wasted time, so that would be very good for me. And I mean, in this position, it's hard not to be winning. But either way, that doesn't happen. I don't go b4, and I instead go with the plan of I was planning. I spent a decent bit of time. There was a couple moves that I was really considering. The fact that the knight was going to the f6 square, I thought that, okay, well, why don't I just say, well, if you're coming to the f6 square, why don't you just go to the f6 square? I could play this move g5. I was considering. Can't go here because knight d takes, well, either one. Knight takes e5, bishop takes e4. You might say, well, pin, but bishop b4, right? Bishop is lost. And the point was that after the move knight to h5, my idea was bishop to g4, f5 takes. My opponent goes king to b8, and I was hard to figure out this position with the white pieces. I mean, hard to evaluate this. Yes, I'm up 2 pawns temporarily, but this pawn is going to be lost. By the way, you have to go f5. If you don't go f5 here and lose this pawn with check, then these pawns are simply too strong. For example, if king to b8 here, this position is pretty decent for me. The only reason my opponent has any play here is with the move f5. So, a little bit instructive, but yeah, you have to go f5. In fact, there was another line here. I could go b4 takes. Whoa. Rook takes b4. Sorry. I thought it was just recapturing, but I guess rook takes b4 and I'm just winning. And the fact that this file is open is also very strong. But I was considering the move g5, not for the right reasons, but either way, that's why I was considering it. Instead, I decided to throw away the line. I thought that, okay, well, I'm taking a long time to calculate. Let's just play what I know is good, and I played the move knight to c4. My opponent can't play queen a6. I thought that this move was very interesting, opening up an attack on the queen, but It is a little bit tricky since you're also opening up lines for your king, but whatever. My opponent didn't play it. Queen to c7, and I just play knight to b5, and I'm like, okay, well, at the very end of the day, at the very least, I'm like completely winning. There's nothing to be done here. Yes, my opponent could have some play here, but I'm completely winning. My opponent goes queen d7. I don't even think, I already know the move that I'm gonna play. Okay, I think a little bit. I think about g5 again. I don't think it works this time. The point that now g5, knight f5, bishop g4 hits the queen, f5 takes, bishop f5. This position actually isn't that good. After takes, you don't take back. Sorry, you take the knight here. You obviously don't take back since the thing is defended. Stupid me. And like this position is interesting, but you're gonna lose the pawn, and black might be able to get his pieces out. For example, black has the bishop here, right? Knight e3 is the line, and then whatever. We play chess. Instead, of course, I know my tactics, and I play the move b4. Technically a brilliant move, but it's not that big. My opponent can take here. I'd win his queen, so he doesn't do that. It's not that brilliant. In fact, it's not even like the greatest move ever. It's not even the best brilliant move of this game. There's much better moves. It's not even the best. It's not even close to one of the greatest moves of this game. But b4, ripping up with the position. This is the next move, and this is really bad. For example, the top engine line is taking this pawn, which is just losing a knight because queen to b5, knight here doesn't really work now due to rook takes d6 hitting my queen. But I have knight takes e5, and right, everything. I'm just completely winning. Queen e8, b takes c5, threatening checkmate. Like the position is over if my opponent does this. But again, it's very tricky here. But my opponent finds the best move. The next threat in this position is that there's some lines where I'm able to like get my knight here. I want to play this move, takes, and then just take this pawn. Sorry, I'll take that pawn. b4. I want to takes, and then actually push this pawn, right? And eventually I'm gonna win this, and then I'm gonna win everything. And you can never like play a6 because this square is over. You can never play this move because there's lines where I'm able to get my knights into this square, and like my knights are just way too powerful here. My opponent is just not having a good time. So my opponent plays king to b8, which is the only move in the position, opening up this threat here. Now this is a threat because this move is not with check, and I have to be a little bit careful to do everything correctly. Of course, the first move that comes to mind is b takes c5. No thought, b takes c5, d takes c5, d6, and I'm winning. But I couldn't believe this. This idea of b takes c5, d takes c5, d6, it makes sense. It makes sense. But I was unsure what was going on after a6 here. I didn't think that this was exactly correct. After b takes c5, he can't play a6 immediately because of c6, obviously. But for some reason, I was just worried in this position that after a6 I was doing badly. And after knight to c7, I just wasn't sure where my play was, right? I just wasn't sure what my play was because, like, I thought king a7, but I just completely missed this. I just completely missed that I'm completely winning here, right? Takes and, like, checkmate, right? But yeah, I just didn't see that, so I went for a little bit more of a passive route. I played the second best move, which is just not a good move at all. I played knight to c3. And the point was, okay, I'm moving my knight out of the way, and I have a basic idea that I want to eventually go here. Eventually. But first, I want to play with this knight here, and I want to get pressure on my king immediately, as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, right? Also, I'm preventing, like, this move. I don't like this move, so I'm going to prevent it by takes, f3, right? Either way, knight c3 is a pretty good move. Of course, cb4 is much better, but I didn't really see that, in all honesty, in all of the depth, and didn't want to calculate. And, yeah, it's really game over here if my opponent doesn't know what they're doing. The only way to survive is to put something on the c file. Put something on the c file, and then, like, try to get the piece to this square if I ever take, which is logical, but it's hard to see with my opponent's like 30 minutes on the clock at this point. And especially for 1500, it's hard to see. Knight to c3. My opponent plays knight to e4 after some thought, and I had already had this all calculated out, and I knew that I had a winning advantage here. Knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, f3, bishop to g6, b takes c5, d takes c5, and knight to a5. I calculated this all, and I realized that in this position, my opponent simply has no way to defend this pawn. If you go here, you get forked, king here, and the rook here. I'm threatening this immediately, so it's very, very tricky to play. In fact, b6 is the best move. There's nothing else that he can do. But my opponent, of course, going for glory, not wanting to concede, and just agree that he's going to lose the game. He plays king to a8, which is a decent move. But now, I play one of the greatest checkmates I've ever played. Knight takes b7 is the first move. My opponent realized in this position that he cannot play rook b8 because of bishop to b5. Taking this would result in bishop to c6, pinning the queen and winning the game. And if my opponent didn't do that, okay, the queen's hanging, and if this move, bishop to c6 anyway, and my opponent's gonna have to sack the queen, opponent's probably gonna have to go here. She's gonna have to go here. And there's nothing to do because I'm simply threatening too much. I'm threatening way too much in this position, and he has to respond. But he realized that, and instead played rook to c8, which is somehow worse. It's somehow worse to play rook to c8 here. Which the point of rook to c8 is that you're giving the king another breathing square, so then bishop to b5 isn't that strong. And also after bishop to b5 and bishop to c6, you're able to take here and then sack the rook. But it doesn't matter because I played bishop to b5 anyway. And it's game over. Queen takes b7, bishop to c6. I had this all calculated out. My opponent can't take because of this. And after rook to c6, rook takes b7. My opponent cannot take. My opponent has to go with any other move, rook to d6 probably. And then at the end of this line, I am simply going to win. I thought that I was just going to play queen b1. And I mean, come on. What are we doing here? Rook back to d8. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? Come on. What are we doing here, right? This is incredible, and there's nothing to be done. My opponent goes queen to e7, and I was praying here that my opponent would allow me to finish this game in style. I play bishop to c6. My opponent can't do anything. I'm literally threatening everything. If my opponent goes king to b8, what was the line? My opponent goes king to b8. I think I go with d6 after king to b8. King b8, d6. Yes, d6 is fine. But there's a mate after knight to a5 check. Mate in 15, impossible to find. Either way, d6 would be what I played there. Instead, bishop to c6. My opponent decides to sack the rook. Rook takes c6. Of course, it's the best move. There's nothing else for my opponent to do. Even if I don't take, by the way, it's still completely fine. It's not winning anymore. It's actually not even better for it, but it's completely fine because my position is so good. Instead, I simply take the pawn on d6. The rook on d6, and I'm up 4 points of material. The game is over, but we're gonna do it in style. My opponent goes bishop to h6 and allows me to play one of the greatest moves that I think I've ever played. Oh my god. Oh my god. I realize here that I have a very, very sneaky idea. I want to play queen d5. I want to end the game immediately. So I want to play queen d5, c7, and go for a checkmate. This is my idea. I want to go queen d5, c7. My opponent takes. Then I have a mate after this move. It's just like any knight move. It's checkmate. My opponent has to block, and then it's mate, right? Because of my opponent can't go run away because of this rook. But I realized that after I played queen d5, if I play the move queen d5, let's just put it on the board here. If I play the move queen d5, my opponent can play queen to e6, trade my queen, and yes, this is completely winning. This is completely winning. Knight to c5, I win. But I realized that instead of that, I have a way to win the game immediately here. If instead of queen to d5, I simply play c7 first. And this was such a cool move. When I found this move over the board, I was like jumping out of my chair. Oh my god. It's so cool. If the engine runs a little bit further, it'll say that it's a mate in 12 or something crazy. There's nothing to be done here. My opponent's top line is bishop to d3, which is insane. You can't even take the pawn because it's just game over. Queen d3 and e4 is the way for him to survive, but I can simply play queen d8, queen, queen, and if I can't win this position, up 2 rooks and a pawn, I should probably quit chess, because the next moves are this. Next move is just that, right? There's nothing to be done, which is just so cool. And c7 is such a good move. Queen takes c7. The mate is on the board after queen to d5, and my opponent allows me to finish off the game here. This is just, I'm so proud of c7. I think c7 is one of the best moves I've ever played. King to b8 is like one of the only moves to survive a little bit longer. Bishop to e4 is another like Hail Mary move, but does nothing, right? Bishop to e4 here, rook to c8. I mean, come on, what are we doing? So instead he plays king to b8. I go knight takes c5, king to c8, queen to a8, queen to b8, and queen takes b8. Checkmate, with my opponent's only escape square being held away by my knight that I put on c5 one move earlier. This move, c7, even though that is not flashy, it's not brilliant, it's not like you're not sacrificing a piece, you're not just completely bulldozing the black position, but this move to me is just brilliant. It's just a masterful move because there's nothing he can do. c7 instead of queen to d5, that's just incredible. It's such a hard move to find. Playing this move first, not going for like the immediate bulldoze move and just winning the game. Instead, you go quiet, you go for the win immediately as quickly as possible, and I'm just so proud of this game. Either way, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, don't let anyone these YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.